Right now, there's other important news we're following as well, including the special counsel Jack Smith just responded to Donald Trump's filing to the U.S. Supreme Court in the legal battle over his claim of presidential immunity. I want to go to our chief legal affairs correspondent, Paula Reed. She's joining us with details right now. And Paula, I want to warn you and I want to warn our viewers that if this news conference in Kansas City starts, we will need to interrupt you and go to it right away. But while we are waiting that news conference, what does the special counsel say in this new filing to the High Court?
Well, Wolf, the special counsel Jack Smith wasting no time responding to Trump's request, asking the Supreme Court to intervene and put on hold a scathing, unanimous appeals court decision that found Trump does not have immunity that would shield him from the federal election subversion case that Jack Smith is bringing against him. Now, we know timing is really at the heart of this controversy because Trump wants to delay, try to push this case back until after the November election. But Jack Smith, he wants to bring this prior to the election. And here he's asking the Supreme Court to reject what he describes as a, quote, novel theory of absolute presidential immunity. But he also tells the court, look, if this is something you want to take up, hear arguments on, please do it quickly. In fact, he asks them, if they're going to do that, to schedule arguments in March and decide the case and move it along on an expedited basis. He says that the charges here, the allegations, quote, strike at the heart of democracy, and says that there is a public interest in having a speedy trial. He describes this case as having, quote, unique national importance. Now I'll be watching to see ultimately what the Supreme Court does here. But the big thing here is timing, Wolf. How long does it take the Supreme Court to give the parties and the country some guidance on what they're going to do? Because every day, every week makes it that much harder for Smith to bring this case, which was originally scheduled to begin in early March, before the presidential contest in November.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Paula, stay with us. I also want to bring in legal analysts Ellie Honig and Jennifer Rogers. Ellie, first of all, what do you make of the special counsel's filing?
Well, Wolf, this is Jack Smith's best and potentially last effort to try to get this case back on track in the trial court and, in fact, tried before the election. Now, Jack Smith makes a couple arguments. First of all, he says Donald Trump does not have any realistic probability of succeeding on his immunity claim, and that's something you have to show at this point in order for the Supreme Court to put the brakes on and take the case. And then Jack Smith says, and there's a broader public interest in getting Donald Trump tried. He does not say before the election. Jack Smith continues to refuse to acknowledge that he's motivated by the election, but he says there's a broad public interest in getting Donald Trump tried quickly on these charges. Now, the other thing Jack Smith says to the Supreme Court is, if you are not going to put this on pause, if you are going to take this case, please give us as short and quick a schedule as you possibly can. Jack Smith obviously wants to cover himself at every turn and give himself the maximum possible chance to get this case tried before the election.
Jennifer, what stands out to you?
Well, I agree with Ellie. All of those points are important. To me, I think the critical point and the one that Jack Smith started with is this notion that you can't stay this matter if you don't have a likelihood of success on the merits. Really what he's saying to them is the DC Circuit got it right. He's not going to win if the Supreme Court takes this up on the merits, so don't take it up. That's the primary point. And the others, of course, are, but if you do, let's do it quickly and all of that. But really, I think his strongest argument is the one he led with, which is it's not going to win on the merits of the matter, so just leave it where it is right now.
Important. Paula, how does this intertwine with Trump's other legal cases unfolding this week, including the Manhattan hush money case, which could ultimately be tried first?
Well, Wolf, I hope your producers have that complicated calendar graphic at the ready, because tomorrow there is a hearing on a case a lot of people have kind of forgotten about. This is the criminal case brought by the Manhattan District Attorney related to hush money payments that Trump made to adult film star Stormy Daniels ahead of the 2016 election. Now, that criminal case is currently scheduled to go to trial on March 25th. It was widely expected that would get pushed back, because Jack Smith was on the calendar for March 4th. But now that the Jack Smith case is on hold, right now it is possible that the Bragg case could be the first criminal trial that former President Trump faces. And tomorrow at this hearing, they will deal with a motion to dismiss this case. Unclear if that will be successful, but we're also looking for any guidance, any confirmation that this will indeed happen on March 25th. Now, if, hypothetically, the Supreme Court were to weigh in quickly and allow Jack Smith to go forward, it is possible. It's possible that the Alvin Bragg case would move and the Jack Smith case would go first. But that calendar, as we've reported for months, is an ever-evolving, changing document. And it's just not clear right now when Smith's case will go. So as of now, the only trial that is actually on the calendar that we are confident will start is March 25th. Alvin Bragg, we may get an update on that timing tomorrow at this hearing.
We shall find out. Ellie, now that both the special counsels and Trump's responses are in, what is the likelihood that the U.S. Supreme Court actually takes this on as opposed to letting the lower court ruling stand?
Well, first of all, in terms of when we'll hear from the Supreme Court, the answer to that is any time. They can rule tonight, they can rule tomorrow, they can take a week, they can take 2 weeks. If we're trying to sort of count heads at the Supreme Court here and figure out will they ultimately take this case, it takes 5 justices to keep the pause on in the district court, but it only takes 4 justices to actually grant certiorari, to actually take the case and rule on it. And if we're sort of doing the rough math here, to me, it's going to be a very close call. I don't see any of the 3 liberal justices, Sotomayor, Kagan, or Jackson, wanting to take this case. I think there's a good chance Alito and Thomas would want to take this case. So if Alito and Thomas can get 2 more out of the remaining justices, Roberts, Kavanaugh, and Barrett, then they can, and Gorsuch, if they can get 2 of those 4, then they will take this case and it will cause some delay.
Yes, it will. Jennifer, do you think it's likely the Supreme Court takes this case on? And what would that mean for the special counsel's case?
Well, if they do take it, it means a delay, of course. I mean, they would decide it likely within the next few months before the term ends in June. But if the decision doesn't come till June, then they're talking about mid to late summer and the earliest for a trial. I don't know whether they'll take it or not. The complicating factor is that, even justices who think the DC Circuit maybe got it right might think, listen, this is an issue of first impression. This is an issue that the Supreme Court of the United States needs to speak on so that it's binding on all courts across the land and not just the DC circuits and the district courts therein. So, it's not only about what do they think is best for President Trump, to put it kind of in the crudest sense. It could also be about this notion of what law do we want to make. And so that complicates it when you think about who might actually vote to take this up at this stage.